Hey guys, so I'm starting a video here. What we're going to do is do some kind of like maintenance tasks on ebuilds, and by doing that I'm going to show you how to do stuff with ebuilds. It's like kind of going to be like a tutorial. So this one is pretty basic. I'll walk you through it though. So first to start, I have my music going in the background. Hopefully it's not too loud. It looks like it's okay. Bonus points if you identify the album. Okay, let's get started. So, first, this is the thing I'm going to do. This bug. Now, it looks complicated at first. Turn down the music a bit. So, basically, I have this ebuild. Oleg created it. It's called App Emulation NVIDIA Container Runtime, and it's in Core GL Kit. So this is our effort to get Docker running really well with accelerated GPU stuff. And it's not really supported on Gen 2 or Funtoo yet. So what I found is that in testing it, it's missing something. And actually what it's missing is a pre-built binary. So I installed this ebuild, it installed fine. I tried using it as intended with Docker. Let me make sure I'm in camera. I have to go over here. So, and what happened was it didn't work. Docker would not detect it. So I looked into it, and there's a pre-built AMD 64 binary that's distributed by the people who make this upstream ebuild or upstream package, and that's the Docker hook. So it looks for that file to run. If it's not there, it doesn't work. So it may sound kind of complicated because it's about Docker, it's about GPU acceleration, but if we look through the bug, and you can look at this bug at FL6244, it's really just a matter of getting this ebuild to install a pre-built binary that we need to download. So we just need to add that to the ebuild, have the ebuild go out, download the file, and put it in the right place, which is userbin, and we're done, and the ebuild will work. So I'm going to go through the process of how to do that. So first, I'm going to go ahead and go over. Well, let's see how we figure out where this ebuild is, in case we were looking at another kind of ebuild. How do we find an ebuild? So where it lives. So one good way is you just go to vargit metarepo kits, and you can find -i name, the name of the ebuild, which is NVIDIA Container Runtime. So NVIDIA Container Runtime. Boom. So there it is, it's in Core GL Kit. Okay, so next step is, what repo do we use for Core GL Kit? How do we get our fix into Funtoo? What repo do we want to look at code.funtoo.org? So let's look at that. So we're going to go to projects here on code.funtoo.org, and remember we have auto-generated kits, and these auto-generated kits are generated by scripts, and we see there's Core GL Kit here. We don't want to fork these auto-generated kits. That's not how we do it. Now if we were dealing with an independent kit, if it were in GNOME Kit or XOR Kit, we could fork these directly and send a pull request, but it's not. So what do we fork? For auto-generated repositories, we go to Kitfixups. That's where we do all our work. So I'm going to go here, click on Kitfixups. I'm going to create a fork. So I'm going to turn off fork syncing. It's going to be in my personal space. I'm going to fork the repository. So now up here we can see I'm working on my own Kitfixups. And because I've added my SSH key under Actually, you won't get to see this because that's the admin page because I'm an administrator. So just because I've shrunk my screen, if you go over to manage account, I've added some SSH keys. So because I've added SSH keys, I can go ahead and clone the repo using those SSH keys. So let me go back to the repository. Boom, recently viewed. So if I go here to clone, it's going to show me my options. And if you haven't added any SSH keys, you're not going to see SSH here. You do want to use SSH. That allows you to push easily. And you can see that we have a URL. And it has a nice little tilde drobbins, really cool. Okay, so I want to copy this. So I'm going to copy this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my local system. I actually do my work in var source, and I already have a clone of Kitfixups. But that's the one I use for maintaining the distro. So I'm going to move that out of the way. So I'll show you how you guys would do it. Kitfixups.drobbins. So now that's out of the way, I'm going to clone my new personal Kitfixups. Okay. Now we have our cloned repo. So let's look at how Kitfixups is organized. So basically each kit has its own directory. I'm going to show you actually core kit because we have more stuff going on in there just so you get a feel for it. And then inside core kit you can see we have a directory for each branch of core kit. And then we also have a directory called curated and global, which I'll get to in a bit. But if I want to see what ebuilds we're overriding in the 1.3 release branch of core kit, I just go in there and it's sort of like its own little overlay in there. So this is sort of like your overlay root. We have our categories, so I can look at, if I do this, I should get a list of all cat packages in here that we're overriding. So let's look. All right, so there's some of them. Now, of course, we're working core GL kit, so I'm going to go over to core GL kit. And we have 1.3 release here. So, and then I think it was app emulation, if I remember correctly, and NVIDIA container runtime. Okay. So, first thing is I'm creating a new fix for this ebuild. When we do that, we want to bump the revision. That way, if somebody has this older version, the newer version will get installed automatically when they do an emerge update world. So we're going to copy NVIDIA container runtime to NVIDIA container runtime 200-R1, and that is recognized by Portage as a new revision. You're probably familiar with that just from emerging packages. Boom. So now we have an R1 ebuild. And let's go into Vim and look at it. So this is NVIDIA Container Runtime. This is what an ebuild looks like inside. It's essentially it's a shell script that is used in a special way to create your installed package. So I'm just going to do a little tweak here, make it a little cleaner. There's a bunch of stuff to explain here. Like all of these variables that are defined, they're special variables that are recognized by Portage and by the ebuild command and do things. And let me show you where we have that defined on the Funtoo wiki. So if we go over to the Funtoo wiki, let me show you how I got here. And I go to development guide. Now we're on the development guide and I go to Portage variables. This is my documentation for the different variables that are used by Portage. And some of these you put in make.conf, but some of them are ones that actually show up in ebuilds, like path variables for your use is where I start listing ones that show up in ebuilds. So it explains what workdir is. It explains what S is, how to use T, what D is used for, what filesdir is. So for example, in an ebuild, filesdir is initialized to point to the files directory by your ebuild, where we often store patches and other things that are installed with the ebuild. So for example, here's our ebuild, and we don't have a files directory, but if we wanted one, we can make dir files. We could put something in the files directory. There's nothing in there right now, but if we put something in there and we wanted to reference it inside the ebuild, we could do like do ints, which is a special portage function, which I'll get to in a bit. Files dir, I didn't type that right, /foobar, for example. So that's initialized for us. There's a few others. So then there's ones like S that we can define on our own. And I can't really cover all of these in the video, but go ahead and read the docs over here. It'll get you sort of up to speed. I'll cover them a bit more. Then there's these metadata variables that are defined, which include dependencies. And the one we're going to look at is source URI. So source URI in our ebuild defines where to grab the stuff from, sort of the source artifacts. So I mentioned that this ebuild is missing a file. So let me try to find that. We're going to poke around. So if we go and open this link here, and we go to releases. So this is what Oleg packaged up for us. But if you scroll down here, you see they have this other thing, this binary. And there is source code available, but for now, I just want to install the binary just because that will get this working. And then at some point in the future, we can look at building it from source. So I want to copy this link. And then I want to go over here into the ebuild, and I want to add it to source URI. So source URI is just space delimited. And now what's going to happen is that the ebuild will grab that file as a source artifact when it fetches stuff. Okay, now the next step is we need to install it in the right place. So this is pretty straightforward. I'm going to type the command. It's going to look kind of weird. You're not going to quite get it, and then I'll sort of explain how it works. So the simple command to do this, I think it would be new bin, and or do I want to do exe into? Let me think about this. So I'm going to look at the docs now. So this is a good time for us to look at the docs together. So there's all these sort of fundamental emerge or ebuild functions. And these were used very heavily when I first created Portage to install things. And I actually don't have them documented on the Funtoo wiki. But if you go to the Funtoo development guide, you'll see that I have a link to the Gen 2 development manual. If we click there, and then we go to ebuild writing, and then we go to, let's see where we want to go. We have ebuild functions. We don't want ebuild functions. Variables. Yeah, I think we want ebuild functions. Let's see. No, I have those documented on the wiki, probably a little bit better than they have here on the Gen 2 site. But that's not what we're looking for. So it can be a little bit tricky to find stuff. We look under general, function reference is what we want, function reference. And then we want to go to install functions reference. So these are built-in commands that we use to install stuff. And then we have a bunch of, this is what we want. So these are all special little functions that we can use to install stuff. And I want to look at new bin because I think that's the one we want to use. Yeah, that could work. It's not really well documented there, but it's at least documented. We can also use do-exe. Let's use that because I think that's more straightforward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use those functions. So I'm going to first say exe into userbin, and then I'm going to say new exe filesdir. No, not filesdir. I want distdir, which points to where all the stuff got downloaded to, the dist files directory. And I'm going to grab NVIDIA container runtime hook.amd64, but I'm going to install it as NVIDIA container runtime hook. So what this does is when it gets around to installing, it's going to already have downloaded the file that we added. This says, okay, we want to install this thing into userbin. And the thing we want to install into userbin, we want to give it a new name. So we use the new exe command. And we're going to grab it from dist files and plop it into userbin that we defined over here. So this should do it. This is actually the only change that we needed to make for this. Now, if you don't have Docker set up, you can't really test this, but you may do some kind of similar change to another ebuild. Maybe a file is missing or something. You use basically a similar approach. And I also showed you where to look for documentation for stuff. Now one thing I noticed here is we're installing an AMD 64 binary. So an x86 64-bit binary. But here on keywords, we have this ebuild marked to run on any architecture. Well, that's not really the case at this point. So I'm going to make it x86 64 only, and Gen 2 and Funtoo use the keyword AMD 64 to mark that. So this is looking pretty good. So basically when you install, when you emerge something, you know that Portage first will fetch the files. It will store them in distdir. It will then unpack the files. Now the file we added doesn't need any unpacking, it's just a binary. It will then configure, compile as necessary, if necessary, and then install the files. The source install function actually doesn't put it on your root file system. What it does is it installs it into a temporary directory. And that temporary directory is referred to as D. So if we wanted to manually copy something, we could actually use a built-in Linux copy command and do like copy. So let's say we wanted to do this without using the special helper functions. So let's say, let's do this manually, because there's more than one way to do this. So what we would want to do is I want to make sure that make sure that userbin exists. So I'm going to do install.d userbin, and this is just a standard Linux command. You might not have used install. I use it in our install docs because it's handy. It will recursively create directories. And then we want to install the runtime hook. So rather than using the built-in ebuild functions, we're going to do just a copy. But yeah, I think that'll work. We can do a copy. So we'll do a copy of distdir /NVIDIA container runtime dash hook .amd64, and we're going to copy it into D, userbin, but we're going to call it something else. So we're going to specify the name here. So this is another approach that does the same as what we added up here. Now, whoops. The thing to notice is that up here we didn't have to explicitly reference the D variable, which defines the destination for where we're going to install stuff into a temporary directory. Where down here, because we're using standard Linux commands, we need to reference that for our destination. So either of these will work. I'm going to go ahead and remove the manual approach, and we'll just use these ebuild functions. I'm going to save the ebuild. And now what I'm going to do is I need to actually update the manifest. So the manifest here stores a message digest SHA-512 for the RPM that it's using for the existing thing it already was downloading and installing. But it doesn't reference the new binary we just grabbed, and we want to store a digest of it so we can verify its integrity and make sure it hasn't been tampered with. So I'm going to actually become root here, and I'm going to run ebuild r1.ebuild digest. What this is going to do is it's going to try to grab everything we referenced in all ebuilds actually in our directory, download them, and then it's going to update the manifest. So now the manifest records 2 files. Cool. So before I go back to my regular user, I'm going to go ahead and see how this ebuild merges. Now remember, I'm already testing this ebuild. I already sort of did the manual workaround of manually downloading and copying that file that was missing into place and confirmed that it was working. So that means that I have all the dependencies installed for this ebuild already, so I don't need to worry about that. So in that case, I can just use the ebuild command to merge it directly, because I know that I have all the dependencies in place and I didn't change the dependencies. And a standard way to actually install it would be clean merge. So clean will just clean out any existing cruft if you've built it before, and merge goes through the process of actually installing it on your live system. But I could also just do clean install. Clean install is kind of interesting because it goes all the way up to the point where it installs into the temporary directory, but it does not go live on your system. But you can sort of inspect and see how it did its job and if it completed successfully. So let's try that first. We're going to do a clean install. And it looks like it installed our runtime hook, but we're going to look and see. So we can see over here that it's telling us it completed installing into this directory. Well, that was actually what D was defined to, if you remember D from earlier. So I can cd into this directory, and then I have basically like a virtual root file system containing just the stuff from this package. And if I type find, it'll show me all the stuff, and it looks like I do have the runtime hook. I can also look at the permissions, looks good. Everything looks perfect. So now I can go back to my regular user and we can get ready to do a commit. So I'm going to get rid of the 200 because it's kind of a broken ebuild at this point, and this new one is better. So I'm going to do a git rm on it because it's already in git. And then I'm going to do a git. I'd never added the files directory and there's nothing in it, so I can't really remove it with git. I'm just going to remove it to clean it up. And now I want to add the new manifest and this new ebuild. So I can do git add dot to add everything in this directory and below it. And now I want to do a git commit. So I'm going to look over at the bug. It's FL6244. And I'm going to do, I can do a git commit -a -m. So this way I can specify the message on the command line. And boom, I have a nice little comment. Boom, I can do git log to see, and I now have a nice commit up here that I did. And now what I can do is I can do a git push, and that's going to push that up to my forked repository. All right, and now let's go over here, and I'm going to go look at my repo here. And I'm going to look in core GL-kit. I'm going to look in app emulation. There's my new ebuild that I added, and there's the commit I did. So now I need to submit this for inclusion in Funtoo. So let's create a pull request. And yes, I do believe I should be able to do a pull request even though I'm the reviewer for this. So I'm taking it from my personal repo, Kitfixups, the master branch, because that's what I did my work in. And I'm saying, okay, this should go into Kitfixup master. I'm going to merge it. And it wants me to enter a description. Let's see, I don't need to. I think I have a description in the title. Let me do a little bit more. This file was missing. And I confirmed that this is all that's needed for Docker to function with GPU acceleration. Reviewers, you can leave blank. I will automatically be a reviewer. I'm going to click create. And boom, the pull request has been created. And I believe if I go to my homepage on Bitbucket, look at that. It is showing up as something I need to review. Now, typically it would show up over here, but it recognized that I created it, so it puts it in another little table. But so that's your basic intro to doing a minor fix for an ebuild and all the steps that are required, sort of from start to finish. Again, I'll review some links here. We have the dev manual, which I linked to on the developer page on Funtoo. And if we go to, we went to ebuild writing, and then we went to, where did we go? I think we went to a reference page. Maybe it wasn't under ebuild writing. Function reference. Then install function reference to get all the stuff we use in source install. And remember, source install is used to install into a temporary directory. And I showed you how to check to see if it did the right thing and copy the stuff into the right place into the temporary directory without actually installing it live. So here is the install function reference. I showed you over here, funtoo.org. Development guide is where I'm going to try to put all the useful links that you need. And there's a link to the Gentoo development manual. I also have a link to ebuild functions here, where I've tried to define and explain the different functions, basic functions inside an ebuild and what they do as part of the package building lifecycle. So things like source unpack, source configure, source compile, source install, etc. So that's about it. I mean, one other thing I can do is if I become root here, I can go ahead and do a clean merge. So it's going to start from scratch. It's going to make sure everything's downloaded, unpack it. Aha. it had a collision, and it emerged it anyway. It had a collision because I manually copied that file into userbin myself. So it saw it there, it didn't see anybody owning it, and it said, okay, I'm just going to overwrite it. But if you didn't have it installed in the first place, we wouldn't get this collision. So I think that gives you a pretty good intro. Hopefully that's a good sort of first look into ebuild development. I'll make more of these as I find good ones to go through with you guys. Give me your feedback. Was it helpful? Also look at bugs.funtoo.org. Are there other bugs that you think that maybe you could tackle and send me a pull request for that really helps the project as we move to more of a community model to get the project to scale? And that means I'm going to be relying on you. I'm going to help train you, show you how to do this stuff so it's easy, give you all the resources you need, and then you guys can help out more. And it is fun to do this stuff and fix stuff. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.